Hey, I'm Madison Mary and welcome back to my channel. Today I have my August wrap up. So I am gobsmacked by the amount of books that I read in August. I don't know how this happened. I don't know how I read this many books. It is my second highest month page-wise too. I don't understand what happened. I was so stressed. Maybe I was so stressed that I overread. I was so stressed that I read so much to avoid everything else. I think that's probably what happened. So I read 17 books in August. 10 of those books were in ebook form and 7 of them were in physical form. We had 4 YA books, 1 new adult books, and 12 adult books. We had 4 mafia romances, 4 historical romances, 4 contemporary romances, 3 fantasy, and 2 dark academia thrillers. And then my second highest page count of this year is 5,588 pages. Yes. So as per normal, I'm going to start with my lowest rated reads and work up to my highest rated reads. 2 of the books this month though I am not reading because they are books I had to read for work and I don't rate my work books because that is a conflict of interest. The Midnight Girls is a dark sapphic fantasy following these 2 girls who are monsters that can also transform back into girls. Think of Manon Blackbeak if she was hella freaking gay, and their goal is to get hearts from princes and royal people, and that's what gives them power. And so they are both trying to steal the same heart, and they're both rivals, and they end up falling for each other instead. And then in My Dearest Darkness, this is a sapphic horror novel. You follow this girl, she ends up drowning one day, and this 8-eyed stag brings her back to life. She then ends up moving to this new school, this new academy in Maine, and when she gets there, her and these 5 other girls end up coming across this spirit that is in the tunnels underneath their school, and this spirit is like, yo, I'm gonna grant you wishes, but to grant those wishes, I need you to give me a body part. And you're following these 2 main girls, Finch Chamberlain and Selena St. Clair, as they actually fall in love during this. Selena is bisexual and out, and Finch is learning about her sexuality. Okay, so we have got, first up, my 3-star reads. We have How We Fall Apart by Katie Zhao. This is a dark academia thriller. It is One of Us is Lying meets Crazy Rich Asians. That is literally how this was described, and that is literally what this book is. It was awesome as a dark academia book, but it wasn't great as a thriller. I didn't think the plot twists, the kind of suspense was really there for this book. I felt like it was too slow paced for a thriller, and something that was pitched so much as being oh my god, what is happening? I was kind of bruh, why is no one really caring what's happening until the last 10% of the book, and then things got interesting again. So for a thriller, it just was pretty average for me. I am kind of curious to see where the second book goes in this, but I'm not overly invested in it. It was a bit of a letdown, to be honest. I was super excited for it, so that kind of sucked. Another 3-star read for me was Getting Schooled by Emma Chase. This is a second chance adult romance between these 2 teachers. So they're these 2 high school sweethearts. They broke up when the girl ended up going off to college and he stayed behind. He became a history teacher and also the football coach at the high school that, he went to. She ends up becoming this big theater person, but when her parents get into a car accident, she ends up having to move home to help look after them, and she ends up taking a job at the high school as the theater teacher there, and it's them rekindling their romance. 3 out of 5 stars because it was very, very low angst, and I don't like that in my second chance romances. They pretty much got back together right away, had a pretty easy time being together. The most interesting part of this book to me was the teaching aspect. I loved just seeing their relationship with their students and how they both dealt with their students individually, and it really reminded me of how, for me when I was in high school, the teachers made such a difference, and how in this school it's about them making a difference in their students' lives. I do want to also say that there is a trigger warning in this for death of an animal, death of a pet to be specific, which I thought was completely unnecessary. Such an unnecessary killing of a pet, and I saw it coming. The second we met this damn animal, I was like, this dog is gonna die. And you know what happens? The dog dies. The dog dies. And it does nothing for the plot. Why? Why? Now we have my 3.5-star reads, both of which are actually fantasy books. So we have Forrest Born by Elayne Audrey Becker. This had so much potential, but it was just way too drawn out, and that was my biggest issue with it. It took too long. The plot was too slow to get going. And this is the first book in a duology, and it feels like the entire purpose of this first book was to build up for the second book. So you're following Rora, and she's a shifter, she's a magical creature, she can transform herself to look like any other person that she meets, and then she can also transform into 3 different animals, and she has an older brother? I think is he an older or younger? I think he's an older brother. And the 2 of them are the only shifters that are like in this kingdom. There's like 3 or 4 other kingdoms in this place, and then there's an island area which is called like the Wildlands, and that's where all the magical creatures are, because every other kingdom has kind of started to outlaw the magical creatures, kind of, you know, they see them as dangerous things, but, you know, Rora and her brother are still alive until there is this magical plague that starts affecting all the humans, and it seems to be killing them. And so the king of the land that she's on ends up sending her brother, and the eldest prince to go and find a cure for this magical illness, because the youngest prince has just been affected by it. And this youngest prince is the one that the brother is in love with. And so the 3 of them end up heading off to the Wildlands to find Stardust, because that is going to be the cure for this magical illness. And it is their journey doing that. Now, it takes like half the book for them to get to the Wildlands. And once they were there, it was really cool. But once again, it felt like there were a couple different plots going on in this. And I did love, you know, there's like a slight kind of plot twist towards the end of this book. I just think that it just wasn't, the stakes weren't high enough. I wasn't like compelled to keep on reading. I was like able to pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down. And when it comes to fantasy books, I need to be fully engaged. I need to be in love with it. I need to be like, oh my God, what's happening next? I love these characters. And I just didn't get that from this book. I don't know, there's still potential here, but it's not like I'm dying to pick up the next book. Then we have A Dance with the Fae Prince. This is the second book in Elise Kova's Married to Magic series, which is a new adult fantasy romance series. Now, it's new adult in like the lowest terms. There's a little more oomph than you would see in a YA book. So A Dance with the Fae Prince is a retelling of Cinderella and a retelling of Eros and Psyche. So you're following this girl who is sold off by her stepmother to marry this lord, because the stepmom has spent all the money that her dad had before he went missing, and her stepmom treats her like crap. You know, that's the typical, that's where the Cinderella element comes into it. So she's sold off to this lord, gets to his manor, and ends up being told, we have 3 rules here. The first rule is you have to stay within the house and within the front of the house. You cannot go into the back, and you cannot go into the woods. It is dangerous there. The second rule is that once night falls, you cannot leave your wing of the house. You have to stay in your wing of the house, and if you leave your wing of the house, there's going to be problems. It doesn't matter what you hear, see, or smell, you got to stay in there. And the third rule is you can't look at your husband. That's where the Eros and Psyche myth comes in, because Eros and Psyche, the whole myth of that is that she could never actually look at him once they got married. So that's where that comes in. And what ends up happening is one night she hears something going on. She's like, I don't care what the rules are. I have to leave, figure this out. And she ends up seeing these fairies doing a ritual, and she's like, what the hell's going on? And she sees the fairy throwing her mother's, you know, book into a fire, and she's like, no, what you did, like stopping that. She jumps into the fire to grab the book and ends up becoming imbued with the magic of this ritual. And they're like, you dumb human. Now we have to bring you to the Faelands so we can get this magic out of you and put it back into the prince, so the prince can take over from the guy who's currently, like, you know, running a tyrannic rule over the Fae. And this Fae prince just so happens to be the lord that she marries. And she's like, what the actual crap? I ended up loving this book, but also not loving this book. The reason why I loved it was the fantasy world. Elise Kova just has such a way with words. The way that she crafts magic systems, the way that she crafts her worlds and the people within them and, you know, their connections is just so beautifully done. All the Fae in this world, they either have some sort of like physical like attribute. So they might have claws, they might have horns, they might have wings. All these different things are kind of going on. I really loved how she kind of made her twist on the Fae. And then I really loved our main character. She was really badass. She had been completely like tortured and abused her entire life by her stepmother and stepsister. And, you know, she thought that was normal. And her journey throughout this book is learning, hey, you were actually abused. What you grew up knowing, the way that you don't trust people, is not normal. It's not healthy. And her having to relearn what it actually means to have healthy relationships, what it means to realize her self-worth and to value herself. And that was beautiful. The problem, however, was the romance. I did not feel it. The guy, our like Fae Prince, he was the one character in this entire damn book who had no personality. He was flat. He was a flat character and he was a love interest. And so the whole time I was like, I don't get this romance. And this is a fantasy romance. And so when the romance kind of sucks, it brings the entire rating of the book down. Like, I had more investment in the other side characters. There was a child fairy in this book, and he was my favorite character in the entire world. He had more depth and development in him than our prince did. Now we're gonna move on to my 4-star reads, and I have 4 of those. The first of which is gonna be Ravished by Amanda Quick. I read this for the Historical Hellions book club, which is hosted by Sam and Jess. I'll leave a link to that live show down below. It was super, super fun. So in this book, we're following Harriet. She's very happily living her life. She's a spinster. She accepts that she's going to be a spinster. She's happy to be a spinster because she's a paleontologist. She digs up bones, she looks at them, she actually has an affinity for teeth. That's what she really likes to find when she's, you know, doing her little excavating stuff. And one day she's in her caves doing her work and she comes across thieves. And she goes, this is going to be a problem for me. So she ends up calling the lord of her lands, Lord St. Justin, and being like, hey, I need you to come down here and get rid of these thieves for me so I can continue doing my work. And he's sitting there and he's like, first off, you don't tell me what to do. Second off, everyone hates me because they think that many, many years ago I did this really, really awful thing. And so all the people who are under my rule in this like land think I'm the utter crap. And third off, don't get involved in my business. And so what ends up happening is they do end up coming up with this plan to, you know, get rid of the thieves, but they end up getting stuck in the caves in the process and spending the night there. And then it makes Harriet essentially ruined. And so he's then like, hey, I need to marry you because I ruined you. And she's like, you don't really have to because I don't really care. And he's like, I care about my reputation. My reputation already is to shits. So I need to marry you. And she's like, okay, if you wanna, you're kind of cool anyway. And I loved it. So the mystery still kind of goes throughout after they've kind of dealt with the thieves because there's more thieves going on, more issues going on in this book. And it was really fast paced. There were like a lot of different things going on, so many like extra plots and subplots within this book, but it never felt confusing considering how many different things were going on. And I was constantly thinking, okay, who is the mastermind behind the thieves? And I had all these different theories as to who it could be. And then when it was finally revealed, I was like, oh, damn. The writing in this is gorgeous. The characters, their romance is so beautiful. Harriet is such a blunt person. She's so blasé. She cares about her bones. She cares about her work, her job, nothing else. She'll be having a conversation with people and she'll be like, can I go home now? Because like, I really don't care about this. She does not understand like society's rules and just kind of does her own thing. And I love when we have a heroine like that. And then you have St. Justin and how he just kind of like finds himself like completely falling head over heels with Harriet and just how much of a mess she is. He's like, you aggravate me, but you aggravate me to the point of love. And I loved that. I loved their romance. I loved the banter. I laughed multiple times throughout this, and when you laugh a lot in historical romance, it just tells you it's a good one. Another 4 out of 5 stars is a historical romance. And this is Destiny's Surrender by Beverly Jenkins. Yes, I finally read this. It has been on my TBR for like the past 6 months. I'm aware of that. Not as great as the first book in this series, Destiny's Embrace. Destiny's Surrender didn't live up to it as much, but it was still super fun. I love Beverly Jenkins's writings. I love that she writes Western historical romances. She had these really, really kick-ass women. I just didn't love our hero in this book as much as the first one. So you're following Billy Wells and Andrew Yates. Now, all 3 of these books in the Destiny series follows the 3 Yates brothers, and they have like this massive ranch in the Western California area. And they have like their mum, who's Alonza Yates, and she is this amazing Spanish lady who is just like so kick-ass. I love the mum the most. Out of all the different characters in this series, the mum is my favorite. But Andrew is a lawyer. He's quite well known in the area, and Billy is a prostitute. And Billy is his prostitute. Whenever he's in town, he pays hella money for her. They have a lovely time. Until one day, Billy accidentally gets pregnant. She doesn't tell him. She doesn't think he needs to know. She's like, you know what, it's fine. Like, I screwed up here. This is my fault. Until the lady of the prostitute house, a brothel? I don't want to call it a different word. The brothel. She ends up, you know, threatening Billy. And then the lady, her her son, who is like kind of the muscle for all the prostitutes, he then starts to really violently come after Billy. And she's like, I need to protect my son, my child, my baby, so I need to actually find Andrew. And it's been like a year or two since she's given birth at this point. So she ends up going to him. She ends up being like, hey, this is your child. Please look after him. I don't ask for anything else. I'm not going to ask for any money. I'm going to leave him here. I'm going to go back to my life. I just need you to keep him safe. And he's like, no. And she's like, what do you mean, no? The dude's going to come kill both of us. And he's like, I don't want to look after the baby. And then his mum comes in, Alonso, and she's like, no, screw both of you two. You're getting married. And so they're forced to get married, and it's their romance. I loved so many aspects of this book. It just didn't kind of hold as much of a star to the first book in this series. I think that there was just, took too much time for them to kind of come back together, and Andrew just didn't have as much pull to me as the hero in the first book. So still really enjoy the series, still really love Beverly Jenkins, and can't wait to read more from her. Then we have Snow by Sophie Lark. I really hope you watched my vlog when I read this, because it was a wild ride, because I loved this book, but I still don't know why I feel like I'd read it before. So in this book, we're following Snow and Sasha. This is set in Russia. Sophie Lark's entire Underworld series is set in Russia. This is the second book in that series. Basically, Snow's an underground fighter. He doesn't really work for the Bratva until one day he ends up beating this one guy up, and then one of the Bratva bosses is like, hey, come compete in my tournament. If you make it all the way through, you're gonna earn hella money, and then maybe you can come work for me and make even more money. And Snow's like, kind of like money, kind of need the money so I can go to the United States and become a proper, you know, like MMA boxer. So I'll do this, I'll be your fighter. And then you have Sasha, and Sasha has just graduated from medical school. She's super excited. She comes home to tell her parents, and then she finds out that her dad is in deep, deep debt and deep, deep doo-doo to the Russians. And she's like, what have you done? And one day she ends up overhearing that the Russians are going to kill her dad if he does not pay up. So she ends up going to the Russians instead and being like, hey, I will take my dad's debt. I will work for you as a doctor. I just got my degree. So she ends up working for them as their doctor. Obviously she does a lot more than just, you know, patching people up. She's got to, like, you know, dismember bodies and things like that, which is really badass, but like she kind of pukes for days afterwards from that experience. But it was really cool at the same time. And what ends up happening is then we're crossing paths, because when he gets hurt in one of the tournaments, she ends up being the doctor who fixes him, and it's their romance. Obviously it's a forbidden romance for the two of them. They're not supposed to be together. They're trying to figure out how to get out of this world, how to get out of this life. Neither of them wants anything to do with the Russian Bratva, and so I really loved it. Such a beautiful, sweet romance, such a gorgeous slow burn between the two of them. The sexual tension, the energy between them was so palpable, and Sasha's just a badass. You know, she comes into this world, doesn't fully understand it, and ends up taking it by the balls and giving everyone hell. And I love heroines like that. I love that Sophie Lark writes these women like this, and I love that her books are just always super fast paced and there's always things going on in it. So 4 stars, absolutely loved it. Would have been higher rated if I actually felt like I had read it before. And then the last 4 to 5 star book is Jock Blocked. Now this book sounds kind of silly, and it is kind of silly. This book I was so surprised by, because I think that if you like rom-coms, you need to pick this up. This is a sports romance rom-com. It is hilarious. I laughed my butt off the entire time reading this. It is so cheesy. I've never read from this author before, but after I posted about this book, I had so many people being like, all of her books have such comedy in them. They are true rom-coms. And I was like, I need this in my life. Like, if you want something that's just a big pick-me-up, a super easy read, definitely check this one out because it's hilarious. So you're following Brooks Elliott, and he is a baseball player who has just been traded to the Copper Valley Fireballs. Now the Copper Valley the Copper Valley Fireballs, the Fireballs, are a shit team. They're like one of the worst baseball teams in the NBL. This tells you how much I know about sports. I read all these sports romances. I know nothing about American sports. Yeah, it's the worst baseball team in the league, and he's pissed because he was with New York before this. He was having a great time, and then he got traded, and he's like, what the actual F? Now, every baseball player has a superstition, and for Brooks, it's the fact that he is a virgin, and anytime he tries to get with a lady, tries to get any kind of sexual, he can no longer hit. He can no longer bat. It ruins his entire game. So he's had to remain a virgin his entire career. But now that he's with the Fireballs, he's like, they're a shitty team, so why should I even try anymore? I'm just gonna lose my virginity finally. But then you have Mackenzie. Mackenzie is a Fireball super fan. And she knows, she's heard about his little superstition. And so when she sees him one day trying to get it on, she's like, oh, no, you can't do this. And she then makes it her life's mission to prevent him from having sex, and they fall in love in the process. I thought this was hilarious. She's super into the game. She's like such a quirky ass person. Like, I've never seen, like, you hear super fans. Mackenzie's like a super fan to the damn max. This girl has her car decked out in like the team's colors. She got special Converse made for them. She's got everything. At the moment, the team has just been taken over by like these new owners. That's why they traded Brooks and got him. They're trying to revamp everything. They're trying to like get new mascots in. And so they have like this mascot campaign going on, and Mackenzie's like, I hate all these mascots, so I'm gonna sabotage this. And she starts like stealing the mascots and like doing all these like meme things with them. It is priceless. Also, Mackenzie has two dads, and her dads are both drag queens, and that was also a really cool aspect of this book. And there's like so much talk in this book about acceptance, about loving people for who they are, no matter what their quirks are, no matter who they love, who they are, you know, race, sexuality, gender, everything like that is so accepted in this book. And it was just a really fun time. Now we're moving on to my 4.5 star reads, the first of which is Bratva Sinner by B.B. Hamel. God damn, I love this book. It's only 200 pages as well, and I'm still super bitter that you cannot buy it physically. So we have Luke and Kara. Luke works for the Morozovas. They're one of the couple of Russian Bratva families that are in this area, and he has his own team that he runs, and he's pretty successful. The Pecan of the family really does love him, kind of sees him as a second son, and one day there is this hit put out on this guy, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna take this guy out, get the money, easy reward. Goes to find this man, goes to go kill him, kills him, and then the dude's daughter walks out and is like, you just killed my dad. And he's like, it's part of the job, sweetheart. And she's like, what the actual F? But then some of the other mafias come to the area and they're like, you killed the dude, great for you, but now we're gonna take the daughter as reparation. And he's like, ooh, no, because he sees the daughter and he's like, she's kind of hot, she's kind of sweet, seems like she really shouldn't be a part of this. For some reason, he's like, nah, not gonna happen. So he kidnaps her, brings her back to one of his safe houses, and is like, I don't know what's going on. It seems like they think that you know what your dad stole, whatever your dad did to piss off everyone and get himself put on a hit list. Now they're thinking that you can take over whatever he did. And unless you tell me what happened, I can't help you out. And so they end up, while she is his captive, she ends up teaming up with him, and they end up like, you know, coming up with an elaborate plan to take down everyone else. And it's just really badass and really cool because Kara starts off as being someone who doesn't really understand how anything works, knew that the world was a shit place because her dad was a huge drunk and was just an awful person, but never really understand the mafia world, gets pulled into it and ends up figuring out, you know what, I think I kind of have a thing for blackmailing. And she becomes really cool and badass. I also love how like Luke kind of just totally melted for Kara and became like such a sop for her. The reason why it's 4.5 out of 5 stars is because in the beginning, I didn't really know what the age gap was between them, because there is an age gap. She's like 19 or 20 years old and he's like in his 30s, I think. I don't know how old he is. And in the beginning, I was kind of creeped out because I was like, is he like 50 or something? And I was like, this makes me a little bit uncomfortable. But then I got over that because you don't know what his age is, so yeah. Then we have Stolen Heir by Sophie Lark. This is a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I will say this book too, in the Brutal Birthright series, you do need to read this series in order to fully appreciate it, to fully understand the characters, their connections, and what leads to everything. And this one you're following Miko and Nessa. Miko is from the Polish mafia. He has his reasons for being really pissed off at the Irish and Italian mafias from book 1. And so in retaliation to go against them, to get revenge against them, he ends up kidnapping Nessa, who is the youngest daughter of the Irish mob. And so it's a kidnap, captive romance, a little bit Beauty and the Beast because he's this like awful person and she's like this innocent dove. A little bit of Stockholm Syndrome is kind of in this, but it's really phenomenal in my opinion. It's really amazing how Sophie Lark manages to turn this captive romance into something that's truly beautiful, this Stockholm Syndrome into a legitimate romance between these two characters. And, you know, just the softening of Miko over the course of this book. You know, he starts off as this person that you think is irredeemable, this person that you're like, there is no light in him, he's just an awful person, why would I be rooting for him? And then the book goes on and you're like, oh, holy crap, I love this man. And then obviously you have Nessa, and she starts off as someone who's very naive, very innocent, and she grows a backbone over the course of this book. She gets kind of bitter about the fact that she was never really taught to fend for herself, and the fact that she was kept in the dark the entire time, and kind of how she grows from that, and how she takes her pain and all this raw feeling she has and turns it into something else. And I loved their romance in the end. It was really fast-paced. What I loved about this one is, from Miko's point of view, you got to see some really badass shit that he pulled, and I'm always a huge fan in my mafia romances of seeing the action. I need action in my mafia romances. When you don't get that, they lose star ratings. But Sophie Lark has never disappointed me. That's the reason why she's one of my favorite, well, she is my favorite mafia romance author, is because I know that she's always going to deliver on the action side of the mafia-ness. I loved it, but I do want to say there's a huge trigger warning in the beginning for suicide and for self-harm. It's only like 1 page, and it's kind of part of Miko's backstory. It doesn't take place in anything else in the book, but I will say that you might want to maybe skip. Yeah, you can skip chapter 1 if you need to, in my opinion, because it just lets you know that basically his little sister was raped and then she killed herself, and so he decides to get revenge on the people who did that, and in doing that the Polish Bratva end up kind of coming across him and recruiting him. Yeah, love this one so much. Definitely recommend the Brutal Birthright series. I just read book 3 in this, and Then we have Hard to Handle by Kay Bromberg. This book took me by surprise. We're following Hunter Maddox and Decker Kincaid. Now, Hunter Maddox is the top star for NHL at the moment. He's the one that everyone is watching. He's like the best of the best, except for the fact that over the last couple months, he's kind of been slipping. He's starting to fight with people on and off this ice. He's starting to get into really bad situations. He's being, frankly, a dick. And it's really hurting his reputation, it's hurting his team. And then you have Decker Kincaid, and she is a sports agent. Now, at the beginning of this book, you end up learning, well, all the books in this series follow each of the Kincaid sisters, each of whom are sport agents. And they have each been assigned by their father a sport player that they need to poach to bring to their establishment. And Decker has been told by her father that she needs to poach Hunter Maddox for their agency. And she's like, Dad, you can't make me do this. And he's like, why not? She's like, because Hunter and I had a friends with benefits relationship a couple of years ago that ended horribly. I cannot be with him again. And he's like, but that puts you in the perfect position to get in his brain. And she's like, I hate you, but I love you. And so she ends up going to find Hunter and tries to figure out, okay, what is going on with you? Why are you acting like a dick to everyone? And it is them rekindling their romance. This book is hot. It is hot from the get-go. It is extremely steamy, and it was just a great ass time. I will admit there are times where Hunter does act a bit too much like a dick. He acts really shit, but the thing is that he's going through a really shitty home situation throughout this entire book. He has extremely verbally abusive parents, and something happened many, many years ago in his past that he still blames himself for that really wasn't his fault. And throughout this entire book, he's dealing with that inner turmoil, and that's what has him lashing out at people. So you understand where his dickishness is coming from. So you can kind of be like, yes, you're a dick, but I understand why you're being a dick. So that's kind of the reason why I was able to excuse that behavior, and it was just really great. So if you do love hockey romances, this is definitely a new one you need to check out. So now we have my 5-star books. I'm gonna start off with The Bombshell Effect by Karla Sorensen. This book took me by surprise, and I'm now obsessed. So in this one, we are following Allie Sutton and Luke Pearson. Allie Sutton, her dad is this mega rich dude, hella money, and he neglected her his entire life. So she ended up moving away and living in Milan for the last couple of years until she gets news that her father has just passed away. So she's kind of distraught over this, but also a bit resentful because, you know, her dad never really was affectionate towards her. And she ends up coming home to find out that in his will, he has not only left her literally everything, but he has also left her his football team. And when she comes back to the United States, she ends up living in his secondary residence. And when she moves in there, she ends up seeing this kind of cool neighbor and his daughter, and she's like, oh, they seem like nice people. So she goes over there to introduce herself, and the guy is a complete and utter dick to her, and she's like, you know what, screw you. And so she kind of hates her new neighbor. Her new neighbor is Luke Pearson. Luke is one of the captains on her father's football team. Neither of them know who the other person is, so they have like this really awful first meeting because he thinks she's just some, you know, blonde bimbo who's come over to kind of get with him, because Allie is really freaking hot. She is a bombshell, hence the book called Bombshell Effect. But Luke is actually a single father. His entire world is football and his daughter. He cares about nothing else. He doesn't trust the media or anything. He just that's all his life is. So when he ends up going to work and finding out that, hey, this is Allie, she's our new manager, the two of them are like, oh, shit. And it is their romance. It's a little bit enemies to lovers, a little bit hate to love, but it's more like enemies to friends to lovers. It's this beautiful progression over the course of this book. I loved how, you know, there was just so much depth to Allie. She kind of reminded me of Legally Blonde in the sense that everyone looks at her, everyone sees her, and everyone's like, why would we ever think anything of you? You're just like this blonde bombshell. Like, why would you have any brains? And I loved how she was like, I know my self-worth. I know who I am. I embrace my sexuality, and I'm not going to let other people tear me down because of that. And then you have Luke, who is so afraid of love, finding himself falling for Allie and letting her in because his entire life he's been so closed off, so afraid of other people. And I just loved everything about this. I loved it so much. And it's like quite a bit of a slow burn, like the tension, the build up sexually between them. Oh, it was beautiful. Then we have Bombshell. That was Bombshell Effect. This is Bombshell. And this is by Sarah MacLean. This is book 1 in her Hell's Bells series. It's her brand new series. I did learn that like this series does interconnect with her 2 other historical romance series. You don't need to have read them to read this book because I hadn't read them, but I will admit as I was reading this, I was like, oh, these characters would have been cool to learn about, or like this would have been awesome. And then I learned, oh, you did learn about these characters in previous books. So in this book, you're following Lady Cecily and Caleb. And now Lady Cecily, she is a Talbot sister. The Talbots have been present in the other series, and they're very well known throughout society as being these very unconventional girls. And so she is known throughout society as being Sexily. She is technically a spinster, but she's known for being a spinster who has a crap ton of money and takes on many male lovers. The secret is that Cecily is actually part of a group of women who get revenge on shitty men. And then you have Caleb, and Caleb is the guy who got away. Caleb is Cecily's first love and the guy who never returned that for her. I think he's an American. If I'm correct, Caleb is an American. He's a made man, and he ends up coming back to, you know, be with Cecily's sister. Cecily's older sister is his best friend. And so he is back in England at this time, and they end up rekindling their romance when Caleb ends up coming across, you know, Cecily in a precarious position with these people who are trying to kill her. And he's like, what are you doing? You can't be in this situation. And she's like, what do you really care about it? It was just really badass. And I think that's what I really loved about this book, was the fact that Cecily was a badass. Her 3 female friends were all badasses. One of them is a bit of an arsonist and a bit of like an explosions expert, and she likes to, you know, make things go kaboom. Another one is a thief and a con artist, and she likes to steal things from people, and she's like, whoopsies. And then the other lady is like this old established lady who has a shit ton of money and knows everyone's secrets, and I loved them all together. It was just really cool, really fast paced. She knew how to put Caleb in his place all the time, but then she gets hurt at one stage, and he's like, oh my god, you're injured, I gotta look after you. So you got that trope in here, and I really did enjoy it. Okay, 2 more books and then we're done. I've been sitting here for almost an hour, so let's do this. We have, but these 2 are like my favorite ones of the month. I don't know which one to show you guys first. Let me start off with The Devil by Ashley J. What the actual F did I read? This is book 1 of a duet. It's The Devil Duet by Ashley J, and it is a wild ride and a half. This is extremely taboo, extremely forbidden, extremely dark, has a lot of trigger warnings in it. It's very BDSM. You got male-male female relationships in this. You got teacher-student relationships in it. You got stepdad things going on in this. You got hella age gaps. You got some captor-captive things going on. You got some blood play, some peeing happens in this book. There's death, there's murder, there's everything. So that's all I really want to say, because I went into this book not knowing anything about it. The front of this book literally says, please go into this book knowing nothing about it. And that's the only thing I want to say. I just go into this blind. I don't want to give anything else away, because it is so much better that way. And if any of the things I just mentioned sound like, maybe it's not up my alley, like if it's triggering to you, don't read it. But if you're thinking of those things I said and you're like, I don't know if that's really my cup of tea, pick this book up. Because if I had actually known what this book was about, I would have sat here and been like, that's not for me. I've tried those things before and I don't like them. I read this book and I loved the shit out of it. I literally sat there when I finished this book and I was like, why did I like this? What is wrong with me? Why did I love this so much? I sat there and I was like, what? Yeah, I highly recommend this. Also, it is like like, if I had to say on this level of like 1 to 10 of like how steamy and sexy this is, it's like a 20. It's a 20 on the steam level. Like, this book is like hardcore smut. Hardcore smut. And then lastly, we have this baby, and this is Come Back For Me by Corinne Michaels. This book saved me in the month of August. Come Back For Me does have some triggers in it for abuse, where that is both verbal abuse and physical abuse in relationships. So that is familial and romantic relationships. So if that is triggering to you, please be careful going into this book because there is on-page abuse. But otherwise, pick this book up, please. The Arrowwood brothers, there are 4 of them, and they grew up in an extremely abusive household. Their dad, after their mother died, became very physically abusive towards them. He was an immense drunk, took everything out on the kids, and when they all came of age, they all vowed they would never come back to the farm, they would never come back to this town, and they would all get on with their lives. But when their dad ends up passing away, the 4 brothers have to come back for the funeral to find out about the will, and they end up learning that the will now stipulates that if the 4 brothers want to inherit the land and if they want to sell the farmland, they have to each spend 6 months living there. And the 4 of them are like, are you shitting me right now? Connor ends up being the first brother to spend the first 6 months there because he has just come off being a Navy SEAL, working in the army in some sense, but he ended up injuring his knee, so he can no longer be in it. He was honorably discharged. And so he doesn't really know what he's doing with his life. So he's like, I'll spend the 6 months there. I'm going to get everything back up and running because dad stopped looking after everything. And when he gets there, he ends up coming across this little girl, this like, I don't know, 6 or 7 year old who is in his treehouse. And he's like, child, what are you doing here? I need to bring you back to your parents. And when he goes to bring the daughter back to her parents, who are the people who live in the next door property, he ends up coming across this woman known as Ellie. Ellie is his daughter's mother, and Ellie is the woman he had a one-night stand with 7 years ago. She is the woman that he has never been able to stop thinking about, but when he comes across Ellie, he learns that she is now married, and he's like, she is off limits. Then you have Ellie. 7 years ago, she had a one-night stand with a man, and it meant the entire world to her because then the next day, she got married to her abusive husband, and things have gone to shit ever since then. The entire time she's been married to her husband, she's always wondered, is my daughter actually my husband's daughter, or is she actually the product of that one blissful night, that one night that I'm able to hold on to, that one night that gives me strength and hope to go on in the world, to look after my daughter, to give her a chance of life. And so what ends up happening is it's basically the 2 of them having a romance together. Very early on in this book, like within the first, I want to say 60 pages, she ends up, almost getting killed by her husband, and the police get called, and they, a law filing ends up happening, and she ends up, not being with her husband anymore. And that's when it becomes the romance between Ellie and Connor. And it is extremely slow burn, extremely sweet. The entire time they do have this attraction to one another. The entire time they do love one another, but they're like, we have both been through so much. We've both been abused by people for so long that we don't know how to carefully go into this romance, how to carefully go into this love. We're so afraid of anything going wrong. And what I really love is how he just looked after Ellie and her daughter the entire time. Like, the way that he looked after her, the way that he cherished her, the way that he respected her boundaries, the way that he was like, you need to look after yourself, but I'm also going to be here to give you comfort. Like, I'm going to be here just as a person, just as an ear, just as a listener. Like, I'm just going to be around. If you want to come chat with me, you can come chat with me. If you don't, like, you take all the time that you need, but I just want you to know that I am a rock and I'm not going to leave. And how they are just these 2 broken people that come together, and their broken pieces end up fitting together. And this beautiful romance that comes from that, and how they learn to trust people again, they learn to love again. And this romance was my entire life. Like, I never thought that this kind of like a sad romance would be something that I absolutely loved, but this trumps everything else that I've read this entire year. My heart melted and died reading this book, but like in a positive way. And also the daughter was just adorable, and like oh my god, I can't, I'm so excited. I now own the 2nd book, and I cannot wait to continue on with this series and just read the rest of Corinne Michaels' backlist. So if there are any of these books that you pick up off this entire list, my 5-star reads definitely, but mostly I would say Come Back For Me and The Devil are the two that you need to check out. So yeah, let me know what your favorite book of the month of August was. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, please hit the like button down below. If you want to see more of me, please go to my channel, and until next time, thanks a bunch everyone. Bye bye.